This conference will now be recorded.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. మా స్పీకర్ కొంచెం లౌడ్ లో పెట్టారా? Can you hear me, Amma?
Yes, ma'am.
Can I start the class?
Yes,
Today's
ma'am.
topic is on female infertility. Every time you will get a question definitely in exam. One short answer you will get from. Can you hear properly? With this mask or shall I remove my mask?
No, ma'am. We can hear properly only.
What?
Can hear you, ma'am.
Here, okay. In every exam you will get a short answer, and even essay also sometimes has come. Female infertility, listen properly. I think you have already covered this lesson. Again, it is a repetition for you. So coming to the definition, inability of a couple to achieve conception after 1 year of unprotected intercourse. But if the age is more than 35 years, we are considering only for 6 months duration. Incidence is about 10 to 15%. Okay. So what are the factors responsible for conception? One, it should be sperm. Sperm deposits, it should be at the near the cervix, at or near the cervix. This is mostly important at the time of ovulation. And these sperms should have the capacity to ascend into the fallopian tube, and they should attain capacitance. All the spermatozoa will attain capacitation at cervical canal. So they should have the capacity to fertilize the oocyte. They should have the capacity to ascend into the fallopian tube. That is mostly important for the sperm. And for the ovum, there should be a mature oocyte. And then the fallopian tube should capture the ovulated ova, and it should transport sperm and ova on either side. Then there should be fertilization. Once the fertilization has occurred, the uterus should be receptive for this embryo to get implanted. So for us to get conception, vaginal, cervical, uterine tubes and ovarian and peritoneal factors, all these things play a role, and in addition to the sperm capacitance. Okay. So what are the factors? Male factor accounts for about 25 to 10%. Female is 40 to 55%. Both male and female, it is 10%, and unexplained is 10%. Among the female infertility, ovulatory dysfunction is mostly 30 to 40%. Tubal is 30 to 35, unexplained is 10 to 15, and others are also 10 to 15. So most of them are due to ovulatory dysfunction, and next comes the tubal factors. See here, this is a diagram showing all the factors. See, ovarian, tubal, uterus, cervical, and vaginal. All this account for the infertility. I already told you, unexplained 15%, tubal 25 to 30%, uterine factor 10%, cervical 5%, and ovarian around 30 to 40%. These are the common causes for the female infertility. We'll go in detail, isn't it? First, we'll go for the cervical. We'll come from down. We'll first start with vaginal causes. See, vaginal causes, you go down to your slides. The main causes in the vaginal causes are congenital or acquired. Congenital, it can be due to atresia. It can be partial or complete atresia. There is no vagina. It can be a partial atresia or complete atresia also can be present. Number one. Number two, there can be a septum. septate vagina. It can be a vertical septum or transverse vaginal septum. And narrow introitus causing dyspareunia. They will avoid fruitful coitus. Narrow introitus can also cause dyspareunia, which can avoid the fruitful coitus. So, congenital or either atricial, partial or complete, or presence of any septum. It can complete in vagina and septum. Complete septum in the vagina or transverse vaginal septum will prevent the ascent sperm. Only that fruitful ascent of the sperms. Not only narrowing of the introitus also can cause infertility. Acquired causes are vaginitis. Any infection in the body, especially in the vagina, they can cause purulent discharge. Purulent discharge can lead to dyspareunia, and inflammation will be present in the vaginal walls. That leads to dyspareunia. That leads to infertility. All these can lead to infertility. So vaginitis with purulent discharge can lead to infertility. But the chances are comparatively less in vagina. Then comes the cervical factors. What are the cervical factors? Anatomical defects, like physiological defects. What are the anatomical defects which are responsible for infertility? They can be congenital elongation of the cervix. What will happen when there is congenital elongation of the cervix? The sperms, it will take more time to ascend into the cervix. Number 2, second degree of uterine prolapse. What will happen? What I told you, the sperm should deposit at or near the cervix. Then only they can ascend into the cervical canal. What will happen in second degree uterine prolapse? It is not in position. The cervix where it should be in normal position. Can anyone tell me? It should be at the level of ischial spines. That is zero station. That is a normal position of the cervix. Okay, they will ask you in exam, what is the position of the cervix? This is the one question they will usually ask when you get a case of prolapse. So in second degree prolapse, what will happen? It won't be in the correct position. Number 2, acutely retroverted uterus. Acutely retroverted uterus, what will happen? The uterus body will be posterior and anterior will be the, it is not in the, it will be the cervix. Acutely retroverted. Pinhole os in the cervix. Ascent of the sperms will be defect. Any polyp occluding the cervical canal. What will happen? They will prevent the sperm ascent and prevent external os to bath in the seminal fluid. Already I told you the same sentence. So congenital elongation of the cervix, number 1. Second degree uterine prolapse. Acute retroverted uterus where the cervix is in the anterior position. It is not near the seminal pool. Okay. Pinhole os and polyp occluding the cervical canal. All these are cervical factors. When coming to the physiological factors, amputation, conization, deep cauterization of the cervix, all this can lead to scanty mucus. What is the purpose of cervix for sperm? There are 5 points. It provides, what is the pH in vagina? pH in vagina is acidic. The pH in cervix is alkaline. So whatever the sperm deposited in the vagina, they will come up and the cervix has a reservoir. So because it is an alkaline pH, the sperm can't survive there. So fast they will come and they will stay there in the cervical canal. So the cervix will provide nutrition to the sperms. The cervix will provide, it sieves the abnormal sperms. It removes the abnormal sperm, and not only that, they will, because of presence of mucus, slowly the sperms will ascend into the uterine cavity. So cervix is very much important for the reservoir, for the nutrition, for sieving the abnormal sperms, and they will promote normal sperms upwards. And not only that, so in all these things, what will happen? The cervix
Ma'am, not audible, ma'am.
Here, amputation, conization, and deep cauterization will cause scanty mucus. We are cutting the or destroying the cervix here. The abnormal things are chronic cervicitis. Whenever there is infection, there is inflammation that leads to purulent discharge. That also can lead to dyspareunia and infertility. And finally, is the important one is anti-sperm antibodies. Then we'll go to uterine causes. Sorry, uterine factors. How much will be the percentage? 10% will be the uterine factors. So for what uterus is important? For effective nidation and growth of the fertilized ovum. So the endometrium should be sufficiently receptive. It should receive the embryo to get implanted. But the factors which prevent nidation of the embryo are whenever there is uterine hypoplasia, there won't be sufficient nidation or sufficient receptiveness from the uterus. Inadequate secretory endometrium. Secretory endometrium is essential for implantation. Why? Progesterone will be present. This is the hormone responsible for the continuation of the pregnancy. Fibroid uterus. What will happen in fibroid? The implantation will be not occurred. And not only that, whenever there is fibroids, there will be ascent of the sperms are also will be difficult. And the length of the cervix is and the cavity is also destroyed. The cavity shape and size are destroyed whenever there is fibroid uterus. And endometritis, especially in the infection in the endometrium, tubercular is the particular organism. Tuberculosis of the endometrium is the mainly responsible factor for the infertility. And not only that, whenever there are adhesions, that is uterine synecdoche, that is Asherman syndrome, that is mainly responsible for the infertility. And any malformation in the uterus also leads to infertility. So what are the uterine causes? Uterine hypoplasia, this is one of the abnormality, or it is not grown. And congenital malformation of the uterus. Number 2, congenital malformation. Number 3, inadequate secretory endometrium, fibroid uterus, tuberculosis in the uterus, and any adhesions in the uterus. All this can lead to prevention of the embryo for implantation. Then we'll go to tubal. What are the tubal factors responsible? 30 to 35 to 40%. Sorry, 30 to 35% responsible are tubal and peritoneal factors. Why tubes are important for us? Because tubes, they will receive ovum from other side and sperm from uterine cavity. And the tubes contain ciliated epithelium and it contains secretory cells. Ciliated epithelium are for the movement of the both ovum and the sperm, and secretory is to provide nutrition. And not only that, the movement of the tubes are under the control of estrogen, progesterone, and prostaglandins. So the movement is under the control of hormones. Okay, this you should know. Then whenever there is infection, pelvic infection, among the pelvic infections, chlamydia and gonococci and tuberculosis are the major factors responsible for the infertility. These can lead to endosalpingeal damage. Already I told you, ciliated epithelium and secretory cells all can get damaged. Or any peritubal adhesions also can occur with these infections. Not only that, any tubal surgery or sterilization previously, that also can lead to infertility. Number 3, salpingitis systemica nodosa, tubal endometriosis, and polyps or mucus debris within the tubal lumen or tubal spasm also can lead to infertility. So what are the factors responsible are? Any pelvic infection, chlamydia, gonorrhea, and tuberculosis. These 3 are very important factors for the infertility. And salpingitis systemica nodosum, any tubal surgery or tubal endometriosis, and polyps or mucus debris occluding the tubal lumen, they are responsible for infertility. And among the peritoneal factors, endometriosis play a major role. Not only that, there can be peritubal adhesions also, and deep dyspareunia will be present in endometriosis because of involvement of the uterosacral ligament. So endometriosis play a major role among the peritoneal factors. Then we'll go to ovarian factors. This is the major part responsible 35 to 40%. Main problem here is anovulation or oligo-ovulation. Disturbed hypothalamo pituitary ovarian axis, that is impaired GnRH secretion, leads to infertility. Or thyroid hormone, that is also responsible for the anovulation. PCOS is responsible for the anovulation. And elderly women, there will be decreased ovarian reserve, that also can lead to anovulation. So whenever there is no ovulation, what will happen? No corpus luteum. No corpus luteum means absence of progesterone. No absence of progesterone means no secretory endometrium. So in the second half of the cycle. So anovulation leads to no implantation. Okay. So what are the causes for the anovulation? Any HPO axis disturbances or any thyroid or adrenal dysfunction, PCO condition, elderly priming. These are the main factors responsible for ovarian factors. Then luteal phase defect. What is luteal phase defect? Here what will happen is failure of endometrium to exist in the right phase at right time. See, around 22 weeks, 22 day cycle, the endometrium should have secretory glands. If it is failure to present the secretory glands, like under the influence of progesterone, to present in the right time at right phase, that is known as luteal phase defect. Histology of endometrium lags behind the day of menstruation by 2 days or more. This they will ask you in exam. Luteal phase defect is failure of endometrium to exist in right phase at right time. See, E days lo endometrium E status lo undali. Kani ala undadu ikkada. Right time lo 22 days appudu ila undali, secretory phase lo undali. Kani oka 2 days lag behind. 2 రోజులు late ga వెళ్తుంది and endometrium status. So that is known as luteal phase defect. This is mainly due to inadequate progesterone secretion. Whenever there is inadequate progesterone secretion, what will happen? Corpus luteal lifespan will be shortened. So in luteal phase defect, usually the secretory phase will be 14 days, but here it is less than 10 days. Inadequate secretory phases in the endometrium hinders implantation. So luteal phase defect, not only the endometrium is lagging behind, the corpus luteum is inadequate, and even the lifespan is shortened to less than 10 days. What are the other factors for luteal phase defect? Are drug induced or increased prolactin, subclinical hypothyroidism, older women, and pelvic endometriosis. And luteinized unruptured follicle. This is trapped ovum. The ovum is completely developed, but it is not released from the follicle. This is known as luteinized unruptured follicle. This is associated with pelvic endometriosis and hyperprolactinemia. Number other mechanism, resistant ovarian syndrome. Here the follicles are present, follicular receptors are absent or resistant to the hormone response. That leads to anovulation. So among ovarian factors, what are the factors responsible? Anovulation, luteal phase defect, luteinized unruptured follicle, and resistant ovarian syndrome. These are the factors mainly responsible for the ovarian factors. So have you understand this?
Yes, ma'am.
Simply, we'll brush once again. Vaginal causes are congenital acquired, congenital or atresia septum, acquired or vaginitis. Then we'll go to cervical causes. Cervical also anatomical defects, congenital elongation or pinhole os, and secondary uterine prolapse, second degree, or retroverted uterus, and polyp occluding. These are the causes for the cervical factors. Physiological or any amputation, conization, cauterization, the cervix is remove. Play a major role in infertility. And not only that, any infection. And finally is the anti-sperm antibody. Then come the uterine factors. Uterus, everywhere there can be congenital defects, isn't it? So any congenital malformation of the uterus and uterine hyperplasia that developed at the time of puberty. And inadequate secretory endometrium, fibroid uterus, any infection, that is especially tubercular endometritis and any synechiae. All this can lead to defective implantation. Then we'll go to Asherman syndrome. I didn't explain, I think. Asherman syndrome is nothing but uterine adhesion. See, these are the adhesions we find in the uterine cavity. So usually it will follow after D&C mainly. It can be 3 types: mild, moderate, severe. If 25% adhesions are involved, it is minimal. 25 to 70, moderate, and more than 75%, it is severe. So usually what we can do is adhesionolysis, and we can introduce IUCD to prevent further adhesions. Okay. Then comes the tubal factors. Tubes are already I told you. What are the organisms? Chlamydia, gonorrhea, tuberculosis. Not only that, salpingitis systemica nodosum, endometriosis. When you come to the abdominal cavity, endometriosis play a major role in infertility. Polyps, that also which occlude the tubal lumen. Then the peritoneal factors are endometriosis. Then ovarian factors. Simply anovulation. Anovulation can be due to disturbed HPO axis, number 1, thyroid dysfunction, adrenal dysfunction, PCOS, elderly women. Then luteal phase defect. This luteal phase defect is a LPD, is a short answer. Failure of endometrium to exist in right phase at right time. That sentence you have to remember. It usually lag behind by 2 days. Then luteinized unruptured follicle and resistant ovarian syndrome. Resistant is the follicles are present, but the receptors are resistant to the hormones. That result in anovulation. Luteinized unruptured is the follicles are, the ovum is trapped in the follicle. It is not released. That's why it is known as luteinized unruptured follicle. So I think the etiology you are quite aware. Now we'll go to next class, next step. See, other causes are also there. They are dyspareunia with poor coital function, abnormal peritoneal cavity, abnormal systemic immune response. Each individual response is different. Increased sperm phagocytosis by macrophages and fertilization in an implantation failure. These are the other causes. And what are the investigations you will do? So the patient has come. You know the factors in a female. The patient has come. So the first thing is we have to detect the etiological factors. Number 2, to rectify the abnormality. If any abnormality is there, we have to rectify it. Number 3, assurance we should give, and we should explain to the couple what is the abnormality they are having and what is its outcome. That is very much important. Not only the assurance, we should explain the defect and the treatment, and the outcome is very much important. When to investigate? Already I told you, when you will say infertility, 1 year of unprotected intercourse. If it is more than 35 years, 6 months, isn't it? What to investigate? Semen husband for husband, simple semen analysis. And for the female, there are tubal patency tests, anovulated tests will be present, we'll see later. Both partners should come to the first visit. Now, either wife or husband, both should come. And detailed general and reproductive history should be taken from them. And clinical examination of each partner to be carried separately. And we should inquire about the difficulties or defects in them to perform the coitus separately. We should ask. We shouldn't ask in front of each other. We should take separate room. We should take them, and we should ask about their problems. What is the clinical approach? So age is important. Then duration of marriage, early marriage or late marriage, everything is important in the history. And general medical history, tuberculosis is mainly important. Whether the history of tuberculosis in the childhood is also very much important. And not only that, sexually transmitted diseases, if they had any, or any treatment if they undergo for them, and pelvic inflammation, that is PID, that is white discharge, history of white discharge, and any history of diabetes, hypertension, they are very much important. Okay? Why diabetes is important in the male? They impair the erection, they will have usually erection problems. And surgical history is also important, whether they have any surgery in the childhood. What are the surgeries usually they can have in the childhood in female? Sorry, in male? Varicocele, have you heard of it? Or testis in the abdomen, what is that called? Cryptorchidism. We should inquire about that, and any female surgeries also we should know, because the infertility can be primary or secondary, isn't it? Primary is she hasn't conceived at all. Secondary, she had conceived and later she never conceived. So any surgery is also important because it can lead to peritubal adhesions. Menstrual history, whether she had, say, oligomenorrhea, amenorrhea, or hypomenorrhea, these are all important to assess the HPO axis abnormalities, and thyroid abnormalities and adrenal dysfunction we can assess by asking about the menstrual history. And previous obstetric history is also important, especially in the secondary infertility, because to rule out any adhesions. And number of pregnancies she had and the interval between them is important in obstetric history. And pregnancy related complications. What are those related complications? Puerperal sepsis. This puerperal sepsis can also lead to adhesions, and sometimes the abortions, vigorous curettage, usually it will occur when they undergo abortion by dais or untrained people. That can lead to Asherman syndrome. And any contraceptive practice, IUCD, that can lead to PID. Usually after first delivery, usually they will advise take IUCD. So that also can lead to PID, pelvic inflammatory disease, that leads to infertility. And any sexual problems regarding, we should ask about dyspareunia or loss of libido, we should ask them. And coming to the general examination, we should ask about we should see the height, weight, BMI, then any hirsutism, acne, acanthosis nigricans, PCOS, we should rule out. What is acanthosis nigricans? Is the PCOS class over for you? PCOS class over or not? Over?
No, ma'am.
No, next month you will be having that class. And next, underdevelopment of secondary sexual characters, that is important. And galactorrhea, any milk from the breast, that indicates hyperprolactinemia. That also can lead to anovulation. And systemic examination includes, we should see BP, any heart disease, CVS, RS, we have to see, and thyroid dysfunction, all the blood tests we have to go for these organs. Then gynecological examination, inspection. Here it is important. We should see what are the causes for vagina. I told you, any septum we have to see, any infections in the vagina we have to see, isn't it? And hymenal opening, whether it is adequate or not, or any, what is that called? Closure of the hymen? Cryptomenorrhea. Okay? Then speculum examination we have to see for the cervical. What are the cervical causes? We have to see whether cervix is in the correct position or not, whether there is any discharge, any tears are there, any infections are there, elongation of the cervix is there or not, any pinhole cervix is the os is there. We have to see by visual examination, by manual examination. Uterine size, we already thought among uterus what? Uterine hypoplasia. So uterine size is important. Position is important because our one of the factor is retroverted uterus. So whether it is retroverted, mobility is there or not. Mobility, any impaired mobility means adhesions are there. It gives an indirect evidence that the uterus is fixed to the in the abdominal cavity. Presence of unilateral or bilateral adnexal masses. PID we have to rule out, or endometriosis. Presence of nodules in the pouch of Douglas. Where you will get these nodules? Endometriosis. That leads to nodules in the pouch of Douglas. That leads to dyspareunia. That leads to infertility. So deep dyspareunia because of endometriosis is one of the causes for infertility. Okay. Then we have to give counseling to the couple. First we have to, before starting the treatment, couple counseling. Diagnostic tests, what are they available now, when they have to get it done, cost of the treatment, and what is the outcome. All the things we have to inform them before only. Cost, outcome, time they have to spend in the for the diagnostic tests. What are the tests available at that place, and what are the higher center tests. Everything we have to explain them. So we'll come to the female partner. Investigations of female partner. So first we have to diagnose whether it is ovulation is there or not. Diagnose, then will come from the ovary, whether it is ovulating or not. Diagnosis of tube and peritoneal factors, whether tube is functioning is not, and uterine pathology is there or not. Number 4 is the cervical pathology. From about onwards, we will go for the investigations. See, what are the things you'll see in ovulation? Indirect evidence is menstrual history. If she had a regular menses, it gives mostly ovulatory. And we can ask for the cervical mucus also. That we'll tell later. Then basal body temperature. See, diagnosis of ovulatory test is a short answer for you. Every time they'll give either ovulatory test or tubal patency test or treatment for infertility in a female, and what is the etiology for all these are short answers. Each and every point is important in infertility. Basal body temperature, cervical mucus study, vaginal cytology, hormonal estimation, endometrial biopsy, and sonography. These are all indirect. Directly we can see our laparoscopy. Okay, so we'll go one by one. One coming to the basal body temperature, that is BBT. In ovulatory cycle, what will happen? The temperature will be biphasic because of progesterone. Progesterone is thermogenic. That's why there will be a rise in the temperature in the secretory phase. Daily, as soon as she gets up from the bed, she has to see temperature without washing her mouth. So, without cleaning her mouth, as soon as she gets up from bed, she has to note the temperature. What happens at the time of ovulation? There will be rise of progesterone. There will be rise of temperature of about 0.5 to 1 degree. So this rise sustains throughout the second half of the cycle. If it falls, about 2 days next period called biphasic pattern. If pregnancy occurs, the rise of temperature sustains along the absence of period. In anovulatory cycle, there is no rise of temperature throughout the cycle. See, these are the diagrams I'm telling. This is the normal cycle. Usually, this is the temperature chart. In the secretory phase, there will be a rise, and before 2 days before the menstruation, there will be a fall. In pregnancy, what will happen? There will be a sudden small dip followed by a rise, and there won't be any fall. It will continue because progesterone is there throughout the pregnancy. In anovulatory cycle, what will happen? There won't be any, there is a dip, but won't be any rise in anovulatory cycle. Okay, these 3 things we have to remember. In normal cycle, what will happen? There will be a rise in temperature of 0.5 to 1 degree till 2 days before the onset of menstruation. If it is pregnancy, there will be rise of temperature, but there won't be any fall. In anovulatory cycle, there won't be any rise of temperature. This is the previously old time they used to note the ovulatory like this. But the problems here are, they can be a manual error can be present because a small degree, 0.5 to 1 degree only, no, that's why they can be a error can be present. and it doesn't predict the time of ovulation. Only after rise means already the ovulation has occurred. That indicates, rise indicates already ovulation has occurred. So that's why, so it is coming to the progesterone phase, isn't it? That's why we can't predict the time of ovulation correctly. And it is a daily we have to monitor. And it retrospectively it gives the ovulatory time. And the person wise, hello? Can you listen me? Manual error can be present. So one thing is manual error. We can't exactly predict ovulation and it is a tedious procedure. Okay, these are the limitations for basal body temperature. Then comes the cervical mucus. What is cervical mucus? Air-dried cervical mucus seen under the low power microscope. We have to take the cervical mucus and we have to see under the microscope. What will happen then? At the time of ovulation and after ovulation. So in the estrogenic phase, follicular phase is under the estrogen. What will happen? Like this, the ferning can occur. When you see under microscope, when you spread the cervical mucus and on a slide and see under the microscope, the cervix ferning will be present. So, and the mucus will be, how it will be at the time of ovulation? Thin, profuse, elastic it will be. How much it is elastic? It can be stretchable up to 10 centimeters. This is known as Spin-Barrett mechanism and this test is known as thread test. So this is important. They will ask you an exam. What is Spin-Barrett mechanism? This is the cervical mucus at the time of ovulation will be thin, profuse and elastic. The elasticity will be stretched up to 10 centimeters. It is called as Spin-Barrett mechanism. And this is known as thread test. And in post-ovulatory, in the secretory phase, what will happen? If you take the cervical mucus that time, the ferning won't be seen. Okay? And this thin, profuse mucus will become thick and tenacious. And it is not stretchable at all. This is known as sorry. This is known as tech. So this is important. Cervical mucus is very much important in assessing the ovulation and anovulation. Then comes the hormones. What are the hormones we will go through? Progesterone, serum LH, serum estradiol, prolactin, FSH, serum TSH and urinary LH. These are the hormones usually we will assess. So simply FSH, LH, estrogen, progesterone, prolactin, TSH and urinary LH. You can remember like this. FSH, LH, estrogen, progesterone, serum, prolactin and serum TSH and urinary LH. These are the hormones usually we does the test for undergraduation. If you write the names, it will be more than enough. And finally, is the endometrial biopsy. This is more important. When you will do this endometrial biopsy, previously when we are studying, when the ultrasound is not there, usually 2 days before, around 21st to 23rd day of the cycle, we will do endometrial biopsy. Why that time? Because after ovulation, there will be subnuclear vacuolations in the endometrial tissue. So that indicates ovulation has occurred. So that's why around 21 to 23rd days of the cycle, we will do with the endometrial curette. We will take the biopsy from the endometrial cavity and this endometrial tissue, what we have attained, we have to keep in the formalin. We have to send for the histopathological examination. In the histopathological examination, we will see whether the subnuclear vacuolations are there, which indicates ovulation has occurred, and progesterone is under the control of secretory phase. And not only that, we have to see for the gram staining and culture also for the tissue. Gram staining and culture for what we will rule out? Tubercular endometritis. Okay. For this sake, we have to see gram staining and culture. That indicates secretory endometrial glands in the second half of the cycle indicates ovulation. So, like this, we can do endometrial biopsy. Then comes the sonography. This is very much nowadays we are doing only this. Endometrial thickness usually by the end of secretory phase will be 10 centimeters. How much is the growth of follicle every day? 1 millimeter it will grow. The follicle will grow about 1 millimeter per day. For that, we can see for both endometrial thickness and the follicular growth. At the time of ovulation, it will be 18 to 20 mm for the follicle to rupture. Helpful for confirmation of the ovulation occur. However, you will know, see, daily we have to see the follicle size from the day 10th. Okay? Then, after attaining the follicle size of 18 to 20 millimeters, usually there will be a rupture. So on sonography, how you will see there will be a collapsed follicle, number one, and fluid in the pouch of Douglas. So whenever you see a fluid in the pouch of Douglas and the size of the follicle, serial measurements of follicular size is important. When the collapsed follicle is seen, then it indicates ovulation. I think next class will also there. We'll go just brief. So couple investigations are important. We have to investigate both male and female. We have to talk to them. General examination and gynecological examination are important. Then followed by couple counseling regarding the cost and treatment and modalities available in our hospital and higher centers also. First, we have to see for the diagnosis of ovulation. What are those tests? Menstrual history, indirect way of, then basal body temperature, cervical mucus, endometrial biopsy, sonography, and hormones. These are the 5 things which we have to see for the diagnosis of ovulation. Basal body temperature, biphasic pattern. This is a short answer for you. Biphasic pattern will be seen in the ovulatory cycle because biphasic pattern is mainly due to progesterone. Why progesterone? Progesterone is a thermogenic hormone. So as soon as she gets up the patient, she has to take for the temperature. And around ovulation, after ovulation, what will happen? There will be rise in progesterone. That includes rising temperature of about 0.5 to 1 degree. Okay. See, and before 2 days before the menstruation, usually the temperature level falls. In pregnancy, there will be rise, but there won't be any fall. In ovulation, there won't be any rise at all. The manual errors are more. We can't predict ovulation correct timely. Retrospectively only we can predict, and it is a tedious procedure. And this is replaced with ultrasound. Cervical mucus. This is important. Estrogenic phase. This Furning pattern is seen. Spin Barkett mechanism is stretchable up to, mucus is stretchable up to 10 centimeters. This is thread test, and Furning disappears in the post-ovulatory, in the secretory phase. And this is known as TEC. Here it is spin Barkett mechanism. This is features of TEC. Here it is not stretchable. Then hormones are estrogen, progesterone, serum of FSH and LH, prolactin, thyroid, and urinary LH are important. Endometrial biopsy, this is very much important. Around day of 21 to 23rd day of the cycle, we'll go for HPE, histopathological examination, staining and culture. Staining and culture to rule out tuberculosis. Histopathology to know the pattern of the endometrium. Subnuclear vacuolations, this indicates ovulation. That is important in the endometrial biopsy. We have to see this. So we have to diagnose like this. Then sonography, we have to see for the thickness of the endometrium and follicular size. Serial measurement of the follicle is important. When it reaches the 18 mm, usually it will rupture. So to confirm whether it is ovulated or not, we have to see the collapsed follicle and fluid in the pouch of Douglas. Shall I stop here? Next class we will continue tubal factors and treatment. Okay? Okay, na?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, ma'am.
ఇక్కడ క్లాస్ కూడా